The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you all so much for joining us here on CPA Academy. This is Jason Bookman speaking. I am not one of the faces that you can see right now. Those are our fantastic presenters, Jina Etienne and Terry Pierce, who you're going to hear a lot from over the next hour on today's topic of diversity and inclusion one-on-one, recruiting diversity. And before we get into the webinar, I want to check that everyone can see and hear. So if you haven't gone to the GoToWebinar questions panel already to let me know that everything's working and that you can hear my voice and see the presenters and see the slides on your screen, please go ahead and do so in that questions panel. Feel free to let me know where you're listening in from as well. I see people checking in from New York, from North Carolina, from the Gulf Coast, from Atlanta, Washington, people from all over the country, and thank you all so much for being here. Now that we know everything is working, let's move on to some quick housekeeping regarding polls and credit for today's webinar. This is a one CPE webinar. The way you earn credit, the way you earn that one CPE is to do two things. You need to stay logged in for at least 50 minutes out of the full time of our webinar, and you need to answer at least 3 of the 4 poll questions that will come up throughout our time. When the polls come up, hit the button corresponding with your answer, and then hit the submit button in order to register your response. CPE will be issued from our team here at CPA Academy by the end of the day today and available in your accounts within 24 hours. Handouts for today's session are available to download over in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar control panel. They are also available to access in your CPA Academy accounts. And now that we've gotten to the end of the housekeeping, I'm going to step out of the way and turn things over to our presenters. So Jina, Terry, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. And so I'm excited to be here with Terry. Let's start with introducing you, Terry. So Terry and I met several years ago. I think it was when I was with NABA, maybe
I believe so.
25 years in talent acquisition, all related. But if I did the math right, is that 16 years really focusing on and having specialized expertise in the recruiting space?
Somewhere around there. I think I had hair when I first started on the recruiting side, so it's been a while, but yes.
That's a nice one. Thank you. We've chatted about this conversation before. I know you've got a lot of great information to share, so I don't want to spend too much time on your bio. I do want people to know when they download the handout and come to this slide, at the bottom, all of those contact links are clickable. So watch out, Terry. You might actually be getting some emails and some LinkedIn invites.
Love to hear from people.
And so with that, just a quick, oh no, sorry, I don't want to go into the overview. Before I move to that slide, Terry, the question I'd like to ask everybody is, you know, why are you passionate about this topic that is important to you?
No, and I appreciate that question. For me, this has been something very near and dear to my heart. One, from the obvious reason of being a diverse Black male kind of in public accounting. And as I've told other people before, I'm an anomaly. I was when I first started. And I'm passionate about creating those opportunities for others that may look like me, that may not look like me, but also just so they know that there's a fantastic industry, the opportunities that are there. And then just diversity recruiting in and of itself is something that, I'm really very passionate about, appreciate the support I've had from a company where I am, that it's important to them also, and just to share that out with others.
Thank you. So we have a couple of polling questions, and Jason, I think it'd be great if we launched the first one now to sort of set up the conversation.
No problem, Jina. We're going to launch poll 1 right now. The question: does your organization have stated diversity recruiting goals? Yes, no, or not sure? And of course, if you have any comments to the poll question or questions throughout the presentation, please go ahead and put those in the GoToWebinar questions panel throughout. So go ahead and answer this poll while it's on your screen, and we're going to leave it open long enough to get a majority of responses, which is coming pretty quickly. We're grateful that you're all answering so quickly. We'll be able to close this down shortly. So far, 50% of the audience says yes, they do have stated diversity recruiting goals. 21% says no. 29% is not sure. And we're going to leave this open for just a bit longer while we get all of the responses from the audience in. And we're going to go ahead and close out of poll 1 in 3, 2, and 1.
Do those results publish out to the audience? I don't remember.
I can share them right now. So this is how the group voted today.
So 49%, 21%, and 30%. Thank you. So Terry, I don't know, do you find any of that surprising, given, you have a network that you work with of colleagues and peers that do the same work? 30% are not sure if they have diversity recruiting goals.
Yeah, that's the number that really sticks out to me more. That would be the red flag, right? 30% of you aren't sure, which means your company isn't doing enough to confirm if they do. And that to me would be more the issue, right? If your company does have stated goals, but your employees aren't aware of them, then how good are those goals? How good is that strategy if employees aren't aware?
Oh, Jina, we lost the slide deck for a second.
Oh, is it back?
Hold on. Not yet. Do you want me to re-enable you as the presenter?
Nope, I think I put the wrong slide up. So can you see them now?
There we go. Yep.
All right. So let me run through these slides. I didn't put these, as usual with these webinars, it's really intended to be a conversation. So I just wanted to throw some stuff out there for our attendees. We just talked about 30% don't know if they have a strategy, and you talked about communication. Well, there's some things that firms need to do just as they get started, and one is know where you are. What numbers do you have today? Now, I want to park that question, Terry, because I would like to come back to the challenge of getting the data. And then understanding, so what is it that the strategy should focus on? Should you focus on overall recruiting? Should you focus on looking at where you need to fill gaps? And this gets tricky because, well, diversity representation is kind of lacking across firms, generally speaking. In terms of areas to address, I put 4 here. Sourcing, which is where do you find your candidates? Evaluating, so you've brought them in. How do you interview them? Assessing, all right, so we've done the interviews. How do we figure out who are the right candidates? And then, so we have this idea that we're doing the right stuff to recruit more diversity. Is it working? So measure the results. And so can we start by going back to that top question that I personally think is a challenge, which is how do you get your organization to tell you what the numbers are?
Right. That can be, especially if we're talking about within the accounting profession, we know the history. We know generally that the number of diverse individuals, and that differs depending upon how companies define that. But generally, they're lacking. That's just the truth. But it can be difficult for companies to maybe take a step back and look at the hard truth of themselves. Where are we lacking? What are those demographics? But it's important to start there. If you don't understand what your issues may be, where your gaps are, then there's no way your strategy can effectively address them. So I would say it's imperative for those that are trying to create these conversations internally to get leadership to understand that we have to see exactly where we are, what our numbers are, what our demographics are, by level, by race, by gender, again, however you want to define diversity, so you can create the right tool, the right system, or the right approach to increase those numbers over time.
So we know we want to increase diversity. What makes it different than just regular recruiting? Why are we even talking about it in the context of diversity recruiting?
In a perfect world, there is no diversity recruiting, right? It's just recruiting. And I think you and I have probably talked about this over the years, and I've said this to others that I've worked with, when I recruit candidates, that's all I'm doing. I'm not looking at, this is X candidate, this is Y, this is, a veteran, this is a Black, this is a Latinx, this is LGBTQ. I don't really look at that. I'll look at the candidate. Are they qualified? Are they the best person out there that we can get for this role? That's what it should be. But in reality, we know that unfortunately that doesn't happen. You mentioned, are there biases that are there that we may deal with at different stages of a process? And then just systematically, or just looking historically, again, if there wasn't an issue, then those numbers wouldn't be such drastic changes. Depending upon what stats you look at, roughly 70% of partners in accounting firms are white males. If there wasn't an issue, then that would be drastically different. So, firms are realizing that times are changing, the population is changing, those clients are changing. We have to look more like our clients, our customers, people that are out there, our communities. And so if you again, have to look at the numbers, look at the stats that you have, realize, okay, there's gaps, we're missing that, we're short on these underrepresented groups. And let's make sure we're going out to get them to address that. So yeah, there is diversity recruiting for that reason, right? Identifying where the gaps, where you're missing, and then let's find targeted ways to find those people.
So that's a perfect segue, targeted ways. If what we need to hire in to fill those gaps is management level, so managers, senior managers, or management in an organization, a corporate organization versus staff, new hires, undergraduate, those are completely different strategies, no?
Yes, agree, 100%.
So,
go ahead.
Well, so what is it? Let's focus on undergraduate for a second. Why can't firms and employers just go to a university and just start making offers?
And for the most part, they probably do. But you have to look at, okay, what's your return, right? What's the response? But also, really, as we said, targeted look at those campuses you go to. Is the audience that you're looking at, those majors, those backgrounds, those departments, is it a diverse student population to begin with? If it's not, then you're going to continue to get the same results over and over again. So you have to take a step back and look at where are you going to find that undergrad, new entry level, employee. And if where you've gone is not bringing you the results you want, then you have to really look at, okay, where is that talent? And then two, where are those schools that may have a larger group, a larger audience for you to go to?
So we've talked about this though. So fine, I show up, so I live in Maryland. I show up at University of Maryland. I'm looking at all the graduating seniors and I'm trying to make offers. They already have jobs. So how can I compete then if the bigger firms have already hired up all the minority talent?
Yeah, we have the same issue that we look at, and Moss Adams is not a small firm necessarily. We're about 10th largest in the country, but we have an interesting challenge in that way that we're a very large presence on the West Coast, headquartered in Seattle. I'm about as far east as we go, and I live in Dallas, Texas. So, of those larger schools that may be on the East Coast, we can't just show up automatically and think we're going to hire people. It takes time. As you mentioned, if you just show up on a campus and, hey, I'm hiring full-time people right now, well, yes, those seniors, those graduates may have already have job offers, have already gone through a process, especially through internships or scholarships or programs with other firms. So you have to understand, you have to start early, and it takes time to build that presence, to build your brand on a new campus.
You talk about brand. What are you talking about? My brand is I sell shoes. My brand is I'm an accounting firm that specializes in high net worth individuals. What are you talking about?
Yes, and that's great. Your customer base knows that. But do these students, do experienced candidates, do they know that? They may know if you're big enough, right? They may know your name, maybe because they've used your product, they've bought your services, but maybe not. And so we have to build our reputation. We have to sell who we are to them and the opportunities that we can provide, why it's going to be a good fit, what you can get out of this, why we want you to bring your uniqueness, your skills that you bring to the table to join us. So it's one thing to just say, hey, great, everyone knows my name and I can go out there. They want to automatically join my company, my firm, but that may not be the case. And so you have to take some time to build your brand, and that's with students, but that could also be with career center with faculty, so they get to know who you are and why you are a good opportunity, a good potential for a student or for a candidate.
It's funny. Whenever I get a new client, one of the first things that I do is I go to their website to see what they say about diversity and inclusion. And I look at the general messaging. Usually they have something in the About Us, Mission, Vision, Values page, but then they are lacking any message of it on their careers page. Have you noticed something like this? I mean, do candidates really look at that stuff?
It's really interesting, especially with all that has happened socially in the last 12 months, especially in 2020. I get that question more and more from candidates, from students. I do a lot of college recruiting. And so I get that question much more now than I did a year ago of what's your company doing around diversity? What's your, how invested in you in this topic, in inclusion? And so, yes, it's there much more now. It's in the front of people's minds, I think, now than in the past. Maybe it was in the back. It was a question that they might get to. Now it's a question that they want to make sure they get to because it's more important. If you think about the demographics, especially as we're talking about from a college level, this Gen Z group is the most diverse generation we've ever had. And so it is at the front of their mind. They see it, they live it, it's a part of who they are. And so they don't want that to just be glossed over. And so they want companies that have a shared value around that topic. So it's imperative, for a company to understand what their strategy is. Going back to that first polling question, all employees need to understand it. But yeah, you need to also be able to express it and show it on your website. One of the things I'm proud of that we've done over the past year is strengthen our resolve and our statement around being an anti-racist firm. And that being different from before, someone saying, yes, we love diversity. We're all about being inclusive, but making real statements of who we are, what we stand for, and what we won't stand for. And so I think you've seen some difference. You've seen some growth from firms and companies in that in the last year. But definitely, it's got to be on your website. It's got to be out publicly for people to be able to see.
So many things I want to ask about. I want to go back to some terminology and some language you used. So you were talking about undergraduate hiring, Gen Z. I'm thinking people look at millennials and still think 20 years old. But when if we transition to experienced hires are millennials. Aren't millennials, last I checked, in their mid-30s and getting older? So we've got to look at our experienced hires and the demographics behind them differently. Is it changing the way you recruit? Definitely.
And I guess I'm a little more attuned to this because I've got 2 kids in college right now. So I've got Gen Zers living in my house. But yes, that group is different from millennials by far. As you mentioned, millennials are the experienced hires now that have had some years of experience under their belt that might be looking for a better opportunity, more promotion level, those sort of things. The undergrad, that Gen Z, again, they look at things a little bit differently. They have different expectations than millennials do from, the Gen X, from baby boomers, the different generations that we have. So there's lots of reports, studies out there in terms of kind of looking at Gen Z as they've now started to come into the workforce, what they're saying is important to them around technology, around flexibility, around mobility, being able to make sure you are speaking to those things that's important to them and getting across your message as well as to, hey, this is how we approach this. And so they can see themselves working there and working in your environment.
There are questions coming in, and I would like to encourage everyone to keep throwing in some questions, and I might start throwing some of those at you, Terry. Sure. Before I switch to those, wait, what's the next? All right, I'm going to hold off on that polling question just one more time. So I'm thinking about something I read recently. You were talking about recruiting experienced candidates and the statistics. I think I saw something, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere between 65 and 70% of job seekers say diversity is important to them. But then I saw another statistic, I don't know the number, but I'm going to make it up. Something like 55 or 60% of people currently employed look at their employer's diversity commitment. Otherwise, they may be leaving and you guys are recruiting them as your experienced hire. I mean, this sounds like it's a circular problem. How can a company then retain its employees so that they don't end up being recruited by you? It's the flip side of recruiting, isn't it?
Right. It's internal recruiting in a sense, but it's the retention part. And that is crucial for companies as we talk about going back and looking at those stats, right? Looking at your retention rates, where are we lacking? As you mentioned, okay, maybe we're lacking at the management level. Well, what happened to those that we had before? Why are they not moving up there? Why did they leave? Are you looking at that exit interview data, those responses, and understanding were there issues that the company can address? Are you talking to your current employees? Do you have, resource groups, employee groups? Have you spent time having listening sessions and hearing what they are saying? What's their experience? Someone at a corporate level, C-level, may not have the same day-to-day experience as, that manager, right? In whatever organization you're in. So are you spending time listening to them and understanding what's the challenges they have? What are the frustrations? Do they sense there's inequality in training and opportunities and promotions? And then if you're going to be intentional about it, and you're going to listen closely and then see, okay, what can we do about that? What are the things we need to do to address those potential issues? But also make sure you're working with your employees on addressing them. So they understand that you're sincere, you're being, considerate of their thoughts and comments, but also that you're acting on them as well. And it's not just a continuation of, well, we're trying to gather information and learn and learn and learn. And, 12 months have gone by and nothing has happened. Well, how many people have you lost in those 12 months as well? That just exacerbates that issue that you had to begin with. So yeah, it's important. Focus on retention, listen to the employees that you already have. They can give you some great insight, maybe on the recruiting side too. Were they an experienced hire? Where did you find them? How can we find more like you? Where would you suggest we go? Will you help us do that? Get them invested into the action as well. And I promise you, they're going to really help make sure that they find other great talented people. Because most people aren't there to leave necessarily. They want to see the opportunities to grow and develop as a person, as a professional. So the company can show that they're committed to them, committed to that work. I would imagine that they are going to give that much back to help in those areas. So
everybody listening, I promise I didn't ask you to set us up for the next polling question, but you did. So Jason,
great.
Go ahead and do that second question.
No problem. Poll question number 2 should be live on everybody's screen. The question, where does your organization source diverse candidates? Go ahead and get your answers in. We're going to leave this open for about a minute.
And I see some things in here, Terry, I'm going to throw at you in terms of comments.
Okay, great.
Somebody said, nothing you post on the website matters if you don't practice what you preach.
Very true.
Yeah. Pseudo branding is a huge problem in DEI today. When it comes to the data, somebody said, so many people don't want to face the truth. Diverse millennials are being hammered by anti-diversity boomers. Okay, that's an interesting one. These aren't questions. These are statements. I'm just throwing them out there while we wait for the poll. Cut us off, Jason, whenever the poll is done.
No problem. We are just at the tail end of the poll. Everyone has gotten their answers in just about. So we're going to close out in 3, 2, and 1. And would you like me to share the results?
Yes, please.
So half the audience is not sure. 17% says other. And for those of you who said other, please let us know in the questions panel. 16% says industry groups, 9% niche job boards, and 8% says affinity groups.
Thank you. Interesting results, actually. I was expecting to see more from industry groups and affinity groups, but I'm seeing maybe it's the 50% that are not sure. Does this surprise you?
We lost the slides again.
Oh, what am I doing?
I think it may just go away after the polls close down. That seems to be what happened last time, but they're back, so please continue on.
So does that surprise you, unless it's the 50% not sure? And then does the 50% not sure surprise you then?
Yeah, I would agree with you. You know, my initial response was I expected higher numbers in those areas in industry or affinity, but maybe it goes back to that, you know, initially 50% weren't sure about what their company's strategy and what it was. So again, are the companies doing a good enough job internally communicating and sharing what they're doing, what their processes are, and how people can participate and be a part of that? For those 50% out there that respond in those ways, my challenge to you would be go ask those questions, go confirm and see. And if it's not something that you can easily find on the external website or an intranet site, you know, reach out to, you know, if it's an HR department, you know, I would hope if you had a diversity office, then you would not be in that 50%, you would know. But maybe, you know, you need to reach out to those and just see, okay, you know, what are we doing? How can I be aware so I can also be part of this solution, this process that we're doing, so you can share that information out, that you can participate where you can.
So for those who aren't in the business of recruiting per se, can you explain the difference between an affinity group and an industry group? And then what is a niche job board?
Sure. You know, industry groups, you know, probably what most people are more familiar with, right? If you work in a certain industry, there's organizations, there's groups around that. So, you know, accounting being, you know, my background, our background, lots of accounting related, right? AICPA, your state CPA groups and organizations that are out there. Yeah. The affinity groups are those that are, you know, targeted groups within that. So again, sticking with the accounting side, National Association of Black Accountants, Association of Latino Professionals for America, ALPHA, and NABA, sorry, I didn't say that for Association of Black Accountants, Ascend on the Asian professional side. Those affinity groups, you know, have certain demographics, certain groups that they, you know, really try to attract.
They're organized. They're usually organized around a specific dimension of diversity.
Right, and so those are great outlets, great platforms for organizations, for companies to partner with, to go to find those specific groups, right? As they're around. It could be a veterans group as well. So, you know, a variety of groups that are out there, organizations that you can be very targeted. If again, get those numbers, get that data at the very beginning. We recognize we're short on Latinx employees. Okay, what professional groups are there within our industry that may focus on those, or the job boards, the niche boards, job boards, as we mentioned, that target those individuals, those backgrounds. You know, let's look into that. How can we partner with them? How much would it cost to put job postings on this site that's going to blast it out to this demographic that we want to attract, we want to be able to market to? So yes, you have to look at those different areas as a whole piece to that process. Not one thing necessarily may answer or help solve your gaps or increase your numbers. It could be a variety of things that you have to use as part of your process.
So it's interesting, you talk about industry groups and then affinity groups. And I think our listeners and our attendees today aren't necessarily all in public accounting, but someone in corporate America might still want to go to a NABA, an Alpha, or an Ascend event to participate in recruiting. But they also might want to go to, and I don't remember the name, but there's like the National Association of fill in the blank,
right.
African American, Pan Asian, Latino, and then fill in the blank, journalist, doctor, lawyer, which means that there are affinity groups that cover industries, they cover dimensions of diversity, and some of them combine both in the same place. And so those places you can get just undergraduate hires, or are they also experienced hires?
I know, great question. And I know that's something that as our firm, we've looked at to try to find, okay, what's going to be the right organization, right event to go to, and who's that audience at that time? So some of those national conferences that those organizations put on, it may be more of an experienced candidate focus. And then there may be, campus specific student conferences or symposiums that take place. A lot of those organizations we mentioned have regional events, so depending upon where you are, like I said, for us, we're mostly on the West Coast. So we target those Western region, maybe central or Southwest where I am in Texas, those events that take place there to target, candidates that are already in our markets. If you're with a company that's nationally focused, then great. Maybe you want to attend multiple events, or maybe that one national program where people come from all over might be a good, viable option for you. But yes, experience in campus could be different events, but some could overlap, as well.
So you mentioned this a couple of times in terms of geography. Has the COVID pandemic and the work from home changed the game? Can I be a Maryland-based CPA firm or company and hire somebody from Dallas, Texas? Does it work?
I think this has, COVID, for all the bad things that it's caused, it has created an interesting dynamic where, we've all had to learn how to be remote for the most part. I've worked from home for the past 13 months now, but recruiting has still had to happen. I may not be going to campus necessarily, but I've learned how to do it virtually. May not have an experienced candidate that I can meet for coffee or bring into the office for an interview, but we can have a Zoom, or we can, connect that way. So it definitely has opened up the borders for where to find and how to interact with candidates. So I've had plenty of students I've talked to that are not necessarily in Texas, but are more on the East Coast that are open to those opportunities. Experienced candidates especially may be more open to, hey, I was just looking in my, local community, my state, but now, hey, I'm open to, that potential of moving somewhere else for the right opportunity. And it's opened up, again, the ability to apply from wherever you are and interview from wherever you are. So yes, I think it has definitely increased the volume and opportunity to reach, people that are not necessarily in your main area, maybe where we have historically have looked.
So how can a small firm or smaller organization think about this? Because that means they can go to, say, HBCUs, which are historically black colleges or universities, or maybe a women's college or something like that. I mean, are there ways to do that? If you're small, does it make sense? Is it expensive?
Yes. No, great questions and things that we have looked at internally ourselves. We've looked at how do we increase the number of African American Black staff, interns, entry level coming in. And if we're not seeing that population where our schools are, where are they? There's a larger number, as you mentioned, at the HBCUs, historically Black colleges, or if you're looking for Latinx, looking for Hispanic serving institutions, HSIs, they're out there. And so looking to see, hey, do they have the right program that we're looking for? We've talked a lot about accounting, but if your company is looking for different backgrounds, be it MIS or finance, whatever it is, engineering, do they have a program and they have a good population, a good pool of candidates there for you to reach out to? Is that a little bit different? Yes. Can it be costly? Well, right now we're mostly all virtual, so the cost should be reduced right now. So this is a perfect time to introduce a pilot program. Pick one or two to start with, but you have to build the relationships with them. It's not about, we talked about a little bit before, branding. It's not just saying, hey, we're here, come sign up. You have to spend some time talking with the Career Center, talking with faculty, talking with that department lead, those department heads, to share who you are, why you're there. Again, what's the value proposition for their candidates, for their students, and slowly build that up. But talking to them as well will help you understand, are these students mostly going through internships? Are they looking for full time? What's the best way I can maximize coming in, making a connection, finding the right students, the right candidates for what our needs are? But definitely worth the time.
Yeah, so All right, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off on our polling question. I want to ask one more thing. You were so if I'm a firm and I start dabbling, like you said, I'll try going to one women's college, one HSI, one HBCU. There's this trap, though, of good fit. We're looking for people who are a culture fit. If we are able to improve our diversity by virtual hire, and at some point we want to bring people in, is there a risk that we'll bring people in who aren't a culture fit, or is this finally getting rid of the culture fit word? Because we know, at least I'll say you and I have talked about this, culture fit sometimes means they don't look like me, they didn't go to my school, or they don't have my same background. So does this make it easier or harder?
It's interesting. We've been talking about this recently internally, and we approached it as getting rid of the F word, fit.
The what?
F.
Okay, got it.
The F, getting rid of the F word within culture fit, and so for exactly those reasons, right? Exactly what you mentioned, the biases that people have, and it could be like you said, they're not from the school I went to. It could be as blatant as they don't look like me. Or gosh, I'm struggling pronouncing that name. I'm not going to look at that candidate. How do you remove that? How do you make hiring managers, individuals involved in the hiring process, focus on the characteristics, the skills, those actual things that are really important to can someone do the job versus the maybe physical appearance or, gosh, they're in the wheelchair. We've never had someone in the wheelchair before. I don't know. Can they do the job? Do they have the qualifications and requirements that are listed there? If so, great. And I think it gets, beyond that is from a diversity standpoint, really focusing on diverse ideas, backgrounds, that strengthens your team, that brings more ideas. There's plenty of stats and research out there that shows teams and companies more diverse are financially better off. So if it really comes down to trying to justify it that way, there's plenty of data out there to show that, yes, this is what you should be doing. But that takes time. I will say changing those mindsets, getting rid of that fit aspect. I would hope this virtual environment is helping in that in some way, because we've not been able to necessarily have people come in and be a part of a group and say, okay, well, yeah, I naturally kind of lean toward these people better, so they're going to fit in better with us.
Right.
They talk to us more at the happy hour. They're a better candidate than this person who didn't over here. We haven't been able to have those events, so hopefully it's leveling that playing field a bit.
I've also heard that people being able to see into each other's homes and get a better view of each other, I've actually found that I have more in common than I thought. So I've heard that. All right, so we need to go to the third poll, because I do want to shift to something you said about somebody's in a wheelchair. So that gets to the third question about policies and practices.
All right, so with that, I'm going to launch poll number 3. Has your organization initiated a review of recruiting policies and practices? So go ahead and get your answers in as quickly as you can, and we're going to leave this open for just about a minute. Go ahead and get your votes into this third poll. One more after this one.
When you said the wheelchair comment, Terry, what I was thinking about is job descriptions or job requirements that say you need to be able to stand for 4 hours, and I'm here in a wheelchair. What does that mean? Does that mean I don't even qualify for the job? So
exactly.
That's an example just for what I'm talking about. Also, we have about maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to start throwing some of these Q&A questions at you.
Okay.
We're going to leave the poll open for just a bit longer, so everyone go ahead and get your answers in. We're going to close this down in 3, 2, and 1. And the audience voted like this. 43% said yes, they have initiated a review. 38% said not sure. 15% no. 3% prefers not to answer.
So that's encouraging. 43% they've initiated a review. So
that's better than what I expected.
So when we talk about review of policies and practices, can you give us a couple of examples of the types of things that people should be reviewing?
Yes, and we've done this, internally over the last, several years. We actually try to make sure we look at it every 12 months, if not more than that. But I was, looking at the types of training internally that we're providing. For us this past year, we've really focused, I'll say the past 18 months, we've really focused on the bias, understanding unconscious bias and making sure that people are aware of that. And then how can you remove that from what you're doing? So also, part of those policies, procedures, what are you training? How are you training those individuals that are on the interview side of it? Also how you're assessing, as you talked about at the very beginning, those different aspects, what are the assessment forms? How are you, what are the questions and conversations you're having around assessments? What makes someone a good fit? Or, do they meet the right characteristics and qualities that you're looking for? Making sure that your policies are in line with that. And then as you mentioned, I think a lot of companies are really having to take a step back and look at their job descriptions, as you mentioned, in terms of, is it inclusive in what we're saying? Is the wording leaning more masculine? And it might push away, some people that might apply. So I think companies are having to pay attention to that more. Hopefully they are. And that's why I say I was encouraged by that last poll in terms of the response for those that were a definite yes. And, just the no's were definitely a much smaller percentage.
So I actually think this is a good time to start the Q&A, but before we do that, oh wait, did my screen disappear again after the poll?
Nope, it's back. Everything looks good.
Okay. So I have a question screen, but we're gonna jump past it real quick. Because Terry, you had listed a couple of things, and I just wanted everyone to know. I had asked you earlier about niche job boards. These are examples. Why would somebody use one of these or go to one of these?
Yeah, if you want to really diversify your applicant pool, and again, taking a look at what are you getting, what are the types of applicants, can you determine based on applications, what someone's background is, if that's a part of the questions that you have or information that someone can supply on their own. If you see that you're missing that, or again, I want to create and get more, military, more veterans, more Black, more Hispanic, whatever it is, utilize these job boards because they focus and push those job postings to that targeted audience.
Right.
And so it may be a great, small investment for you that can reach a large number of potential applicants, much more than you could do just by yourself, right, or in person, or nationally. If you have opportunities and you want to get those out, these are great job boards to use.
On the next screen, and by the way, everyone, if you download the PDF, you can click on every one of these and it'll jump you to the link. So you're welcome. So here are some tools and resources. I know some of these help with what you're talking about, that if you're writing a job description and you want to know if it's gender coded or it sounds like it's not inclusive of somebody with a disability, these things can help with that?
Yes, they can. So for example, and I'm not endorsing anyone, but like Textio, they're a company that can download and look at your wording, your current job posting wording, and give you feedback on how it sounds, how it could relate. Are you excluding or maybe minimalizing a certain group? And that's based on their data and research, and doing this for thousands upon thousands of data points that are out there. So good resources, a lot of tools that are out there for companies. That if you're not sure where to start, search these. It's great. Like I said, you've done the work for them, that they can download this and click and go to those sites and see if it could be a good option for them. That can help you out. No matter, I say, how big or small you are, there's resources out there. There's tools that can help.
And to be clear, there are more than the ones we've listed. This is not intended to be promoting them, but just providing the fact that there are so many of them.
Yes.
All right, so let's do this Q&A thing, shall we?
All right.
So there are a lot of questions. I'm gonna go back to the beginning. Let's see. Oh, somebody asked for the size of the respondents. Can you address that, Jason? How does an organization have diversity goals without having quotas? Because they sound very similar. Thank you for that question, Patricia.
No, good question. So, quota versus just diversity recruiting. Quotas in of itself is, I need to hire this number, right? To me, the difference is I'm recruiting for diverse candidates. It's not a certain number I'm looking for. It's not to check a box off. I want to, and again, I've said this before, I say this all the time to my team and members, I want to hire the best people, period. Nothing else. Now, that may mean I need to expand where I go to find them based on, my results and what I've had. And again, it's also what's important to the company. Is being an inclusive, diverse company, environment, is that important to you? And it might not be. And if it's not, and you're okay with where you've been hiring, then great. Then you're probably going to be more on the quota side. But if it's really important to you and your people, then you're going to focus on, let's go find some great people and let's make sure they're diverse. And so maybe that means we need to go to use this specific job board to make sure we're getting, more qualified, open candidates. We need to go look at this campus that has a different demographic than just this one where I went to school, so we can have an even playing field and we're making sure we're reaching the best people out there.
All right, don't be mad at me now, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
All right.
You said, I just want to hire the best people. Isn't that also something we've heard that means I'm just going to keep going back to the same schools? I'm going to keep hiring the people we've been hiring because it's been working, but then that perpetuates a lack of diversity. So how can I say I just want to hire the best people if the criteria we've been using to filter out the people who aren't the best people? I mean, it seems to me like it makes sense on the one hand, but then it reinforces the status quo on the other.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to maybe your individual just values around that statement, right? So like I would back up my statement saying I want to hire the best people by saying, here's how I do that. I don't just go to one place or one source. I make sure I'm going to multiple sources. That gives me a variety of applicants. So therefore I can assess fairly and be able to say, this is a great person. Or yeah, the person from where I've been going all this time, they match up and are still as strong as anyone else. So that would probably, make me feel like, yes, I've done a good job here, but wow, there's some other really good people over here too.
Right.
Or you might find out, gosh, where I've been going, they're not as good as these over here. So have we been shorting ourselves in doing that? You have to be able to do that broadly to be able to even justify saying, well, yeah, this has been working for us for these past 40 years. Well, how do you know? If you haven't gone and found candidates from other places, if you haven't really looked at somewhere else, how can you really say those are the best people? So that's how I would back up my statement in regards to that.
And I agree with you. I just had to bring it up because I hear that so much. And it's frustrating because what is the saying? Those convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. And so if somebody thinks I'm already hiring the best people, but they're not looking at other sources, I don't know. It's hard to convince somebody otherwise. All right. Okay, so this is interesting perspective. I don't understand why veteran has advantage over others in some company. Is that what they're really saying when you say I'm going to hire in a particular group, that they have some advantage?
No, not at all. For us, it is, again, looking at what's underrepresented within our organization that we want to address, and that we truly feel that having a fully inclusive, diverse environment makes us better. And so, again, depends on how you define diversity. Mm-hmm. We define it pretty broadly, beyond just race, gender, ethnicity, but we look at veteran status, we look at disability, we look at LGBTQ community, right? We want to welcome and embrace those individuals that are qualified and great candidates for what we do. So for us, that means, hey, we may make it a focus to go to a veteran career fair, right? That's all that means. It doesn't mean that they have an advantage. It's let's just make sure that we are open to those individuals, and those individuals know we want you. We want you to be a part of our company. And yes, if you meet the qualifications, if you meet all the requirements and things that we're looking for, we're going to consider you, and hopefully that you can find fantastic people regardless of their background.
I was attending a conference recently, and I loved one of the comments that it was actually a keynote speaker who she herself was profoundly deaf, and yet she was speaking. You would have never known she was deaf because of the way she was talking, her intonation, and I was actually surprised to hear that. And one of the things that she said is that we make these assumptions about people with disabilities. She specifically said, in this example, if you were walking down the street and she never started signing because she could read your lips and speak out loud, you'd never know she was deaf. And she said that you've got to sometimes what seems to be a disability by one person, it's actually a strength that they have. And I know from experience working with different groups, for example, one of the perspectives around veterans, you can tell me if this is how you guys see it, they bring a whole different perspective in terms of world experience and the dynamic around which they're able to then make decisions and the things that they factor into decisions. And that might not come into play in audit, but it might come into play in advisory services.
I would agree. Those veterans, and obviously depending upon what they were doing or what branch of service they may have come from, but generally speaking, they understand communication, chain of command, teamwork. It could be a broader world view, depending upon what they do, and those could be some amazing skills that they bring to the table that could assist your company, your organization, in dealing with certain clients. As well, you have an international client. This person has dealt with international relations. Wouldn't that be a great skill to have? Someone to look for that you might not find in regular candidates. So that's where I would say it's important to look at those different opportunities and reach out to those different groups.
If there's anybody listening today from a technology company, that same speaker suggested that interviewing techniques are different for the different groups. And she mentioned that in tech, one of the things that they found is that people with autism have a very high degree of success, but you can't interview them by doing what we're doing right now. You can interview them by, in her example, she put them in a gaming environment and they will show you their tech skills. And you don't have to engage in a dialogue. So it's really about understanding also your different groups that you're interviewing and finding the interview technique and the assessment technique that works. I guess that wasn't a question.
That was a great comment, great thing to add, yes.
Some diversity, here's a comment, some diversity is rooted in post-college experience, such as having a child who has a disability. I think that we found that one of the areas that we need to think about are parents, our teammates who are supporting a child or with a disability who are responsible for elder care. This is a new lens on diversity, especially when it comes to recruiting in talent. You have to accommodate somebody that's accommodating someone else. This is getting complicated.
No, you're right. And it's interesting. Our firm just created, we have business resource groups. So as we talk about kind of those affinity groups, but internally. And we just started a disability group. And for exactly that, so a member may or may not have a disability for themselves, but maybe they're caring for a child or caring for someone else. And that is a different dynamic. That's a natural pull on their time, their energy, their focus, but their priority. And for a company, as we talked about the retention piece, if you can show that you're passionate and supportive of what their priorities are outside of work too, that's going to naturally make them a happier employee, and they're going to want to be there and work harder and better and stay there longer. And so I think hopefully we're seeing an increase in benefits that companies are providing around that. Like I know we provide elder care benefit, so supporting people that maybe they're taking care of an aging parent, in their home, right? They may need additional support for those sort of things, or adoption, a variety of areas that parents, that just professionals, that adults are dealing with in this changing world that we're in. So I think that's great that we're talking more about it, but those are real things that are happening for people. And again, if companies are paying attention to that, showing that you're really caring about your people, then that's going to help you, all the way down to your bottom line.
All right, Jason, we have just a minute or two left. You want to throw out that last poll?
No problem, Jina. We're going to go ahead and launch poll number 4. This is the last opportunity to answer a poll for CPE credit. Poll number 4 is live. Is diversity recruiting included in your organization's D&I strategy? Yes, no, or not sure? Go ahead and get your answers in. We're going to leave this open for a little less than a minute. And of course, we are running close to our time, so we'll be wrapping up shortly.
And while that poll is open, I wanted to just make sure that our attendees knew that there were some books and podcasts in here that Terry suggested. Again, clickable links here. So I just wanted you to know that those were there. When you download the handout, you'll see all of the slides that we were showing today. So we're almost
Don't forget
done.
those. Oh, yes?
I was saying we're almost done with the polling. I can see almost 90% have responded already.
We're just waiting on a few more people. We want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to answer for credit. And with that, we're going to close the poll out in 3, 2, and 1. And it looks like 56% of the audience does have a strategy. 9% does not. 35% is not sure. And I'm going to hide that. And the slides are still up.
Yay! So, Terry, thank you so much. I think we could have kept on talking and talking about this. Such an important topic. Everybody says diversity is important, but then we're not talking about, well, how do we increase diversity? Right. So let's see. In our last minute here, do you want to throw out any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation. I would, suggest for those that are watching, have those conversations internally in your company. Even if you answered yes to most of those polling questions, make sure that you are fully aware that their communication is going out, that others can be involved and participate. If you're not sure, if you were a no answer to one of those, speak up, reach out, ask those questions, see how you can get the information, how can you be a part of that solution to improve where you are, because that's just going to make the company better.
And before we close out, I just want to invite everyone 2 weeks. This is a bi-weekly series. So in 2 weeks, May 14, I'm actually going to have Jeff Chin. He's one of the founders of Ascend, here to talk about the Pan-Asian experience, especially in light of what we've been hearing over the last several weeks. So thank you all for joining. And Jason, back to you.
Jina, thank you so much. And Terry, thank you so much for presenting today and for facilitating a fantastic conversation that we're grateful to have here on CPA Academy. And of course, thanks to all of you in the audience for your participation and attendance. CPE credit will be issued by the end of the day today and available in your CPA Academy accounts within 24 hours. The handouts are available in your CPA Academy accounts as well. And of course, we recommend downloading those handouts for future reference and to look at the books and podcast recommendation that you have on your screen right now, which are included in those handouts. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So thank you all again for your time and attendance. We hope to see you all on future webinars and hope you all have a great rest of the day.